Water crisis continues. Even though the state has promised millions of dollars in relief, the water there is still not drinkable.
24-hour News 8's Rick Albin was in Flint today to talk with the man who represents that community back in Washington. Rick?
Brian and Susan, Congressman Dan Kildee is not just the man who represents Flint. It's his home, too. And today he talked about the state's response that he says falls woefully short. And he also talked about his personal feelings about what he thinks is happening to his city.
But what is being offered is not enough to make it right. I mean, and so in a way, it's like a second insult to this community of mine.
That's how Congressman Kildee sees the state's response so far. $67 million promised or on the way.
I'm also concerned that the size of the response is not anywhere near equal to the size of this challenge. I mean, just in rough form, the amount of money that the state has committed is a close approximation to the amount of money that people in Flint paid for water that poisoned their kids.
The scope of the problem is huge. 100,000 people, including children, exposed to unfit water, contaminated with lead. And Kildee says it's the state's fault. He wants more money from Lansing. He wants it now and for the long term.
A 10-year, 15-year, 20-year period of recovery from the exposure to lead, it really does beg for a much larger response than what we've seen so far.
The governor's current proposal for next year's budget calls for more than $200 million additional dollars for services and recovery. But that does not reach the mark for the Flint congressman. For Kildee, it's personal.
And to see this happen, it makes me sad in one way, but I have to admit, for the most part, it makes me angry.
The congressman wants more federal money, too, saying while he blames primarily the state, the EPA shares some responsibility. And besides, he says, if there had been a hurricane or some other disaster out of the control of the residents in Flint, the Fed would step in. And he thinks the water crisis qualifies for that, too.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people would argue.
Yeah.
More from the representative this Sunday, Rick?
Yeah, we had a long talk this afternoon, and he gets really in-depth with what he thinks ought to happen, what he thinks did happen, and how he feels about it. It's pretty personal, and it'll be Sunday morning, 10 o'clock on To The Point.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.